Uh, Survival horror. If you're a horror fan,
Christ, you don't know the rules?
Have an aneurysm, why don't you?
There are certain rules that one must abide by in order to successfully survive a horror movie.
or video game nerd like me, you might already be knowledgeable of what this subgenre is. If not, let me take a brief moment to explain it to you. You see, it's a horror game with an emphasis on survival. Alright, that's it. I'm done. Nothing else to say here. When do I get my A? What's that, you say? That's not an actual explanation, and I should go into more detail about its concepts and history? Also, I'm not actually talking to anybody right now? That this is merely my poor attempt to segue into the bulk of this video essay? Well, I mean, you didn't have to be so harsh about it, but if you insist. If you really want to understand survival horror, we're gonna have to go back. Way back. Wait, no, nope, not that far back. Not that far back. Bring it up a bit. A little bit more. A little bit more. Teeny bit more. Yeah, yep, there it is. There it is. Yep, the 1920s. The roaring 20s, if you will. And to an odd Rhode Islander by the name of Howard Phillips Lovecraft. Lovecraft was born on August 20th, 1890, in the Rhode Island state capital of Providence. Here, Lovecraft lived the majority of his meager existence, living off what he could from his inheritance, the odd ghostwriting job, and the paltry payout from pulp publications for his panic-inducing pithy parables. Ironically, it's these lowbrow magazines that would go on to ensure Lovecraft's legacy, as without these publications, Lovecraft's ideas and stories would have gone to his grave with him. In fact, poor Lovecraft only became popular decades after his painful death in 1937 due to cancer. So why am I talking about this long-dead author? Well, Lovecraft could be very well seen as a pioneer of most modern horror conventions. Most of Lovecraft's narratives were dark tales of humanity's struggle to survive against horrors beyond comprehension, some of which were so powerful they may as well be gods in comparison to humanity. Thanks, Lovecraft, you lovable racist bastard, you. Lovecraft's stories tapped into the core emphasis of survival horror. That is, the protagonists, or the players, struggle to survive against forces that are far greater than they are. In these games, the player is almost always outgunned and outmanned, meaning an action movie-esque stand against the enemy is impossible. Sorry, Rambo, you may not have drew first blood, but the pack of spider-wolves waiting for you round the corner sure did. If my H.P. Lovecraft comparison still doesn't make much sense, think of survival horror like a slasher movie. You know the slasher could appear and disappear at any moment. You can never be truly sure if you're safe or not. You may have a paltry firearm, but really your pea shooter will do one of three things. It will either A. do absolutely nothing, B. slow the slasher down for a few moments, or C. in the odd chance where you can kill what's stalking you, there's unfortunately not enough bullets to go around. Either way, the resources keeping you alive are limited, so you must strategize and act quickly in order to save your skin. Flash forward to 1996. Capcom, a Japanese video game company, releases the first game to describe itself as survival horror, this being Resident Evil, also known as Biohazard. No, not that Resident Evil. We don't talk about the movies. And no, not that Resident Evil either, though the image of Chris Redfield punching a volcanic boulder into submission will always hold a special place in my darkest nightmares. No, I'm talking about the OG Resident Evil with low poly models, fixed angled cameras, tank controls, and the cheese of a B movie.
Barry!
That was too close. You were almost a Jill sandwich.
You're right.
Though, technically, there are actually two games that come before Resident Evil that are actually also survival horror games. There's 1989's Sweet Home, developed by Capcom for a Japan-only release, and 1992's Alone in the Dark, developed by Infro Games. Coincidentally, Alone in the Dark is also inspired by Papa Lovecraft's mythos, so hey, bonus fact. But yeah, these games aren't as famous, so they don't get as much screen time. So yeah, let's get back to Resident Evil. Resident Evil truly proves itself to be a survival horror game if we look for the genre conventions established in my previous explanation of H.P. Lovecraft's fiction and the comparison to the slasher movie genre. First, you are faced by a truly unknown and mysterious enemy. The entire reason that your law enforcement team is there to begin with is that the previous team has gone missing investigating a string of mysterious murders in the area. And the moment you touch down in Spencer's mansion, you are beset upon by mutant animals, the living dead, and some things that are in between. 2, you have a limited amount of resources. Ammo must be found and conservatively used if you want to make it out alive. And the same could be said with what medical supplies that you come across. And lastly, this game pulls very few punches. Sure, there are save points that are relatively safe, but while you're exploring the grounds of Spencer's mansion, solving puzzles, finding supplies, advancing the plot, you can die relatively quickly if you're caught off guard or unprepared. Dying really isn't very hard in Resident Evil. And also, while I did make a jab at the game's goofy voice acting and the English localization, I do have to concede that this game did a great job in the horror department back in its day. Sure, by today's standards, the game's graphics are subpar and clunky, but the game expertly uses pre-rendered backgrounds and fixed camera angles to its advantage to emit information to the player. Am I being followed? Where's the enemy going to come from? Is there a zombie just behind that corner? The creation of these informational blind spots, compounded with the already creepy atmosphere and the odd jump scare here or there, really built Resident Evil up to be a scary experience. Unfortunately, that couldn't be said for the rest of the Resident Evil series, as each subsequent installment after number 4 took a deeper and deeper hit from the metaphorical meth pipe of quote-unquote quality. Though it is safe to be optimistic about Resident Evil's current sobriety, as after going through rehab following a tear-stained intervention by Resident Evil's biggest fans after the atrocity that was Umbrella Corps.
Because I know, somewhere deep down in my heart, I still love you.
Resident Evil has since returned to and since improved upon its roots with the release of Resident Evil 7, which, surprise, is actually a really good game. Though whether or not this marks the beginning of a survival horror renaissance, or is merely the calm before the veritable shitstorm, only time will tell. Though I honestly wouldn't blame you for being optimistic.